Welcome to Tabletop Terrors with Hanker and Fernale from Drunkens Dragons. This is a live encounter machine, and we're going to talk about building an encounter from scratch, like Mama's Biscuits.
Or like a machine, like a project car. Maybe stick with one analogy.
That is better. That's why you are in charge behind closed doors.
Don't talk about my mama's biscuits.
We fisting to. As always, Hankering, if you would join us, we are going to do a Tabtarian toast.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Hey-o.
We're going to say some stuff. But
Yeah.
May you mend the first break.
May you kill the first snake.
And may you conquer everything you undertake.
Whoa.
Sláinte.
I hate snakes.
Yeah, man. Everyone thinks we're saying Gaelic things there. We're actually saying cilantro.
Cilantro.
May you kill the cilantro and plant many steaks.
Plant many steaks into the taco. So if you've heard Encounter Machine, our podcast, you know that we typically get our ducks in a row before we start recording, but we thought this would kind of be an interesting, more cool way is to, like I said, from scratch, build an encounter, give you the thought processes that we follow behind closed doors before we give you the finished information.
Mm-hmm.
So starting out, one of the things we always like to do, and I think we talked about this a little bit offline, over here in Tabletop Terrors land, I like to come up with a mission statement. I think that design is its best when you're at least starting off trying to hit some sort of target.
Yeah.
So the way that I think of a mission statement is I try to think of what do I need, and then what tools do I want to use to try to hit that target or create what I need. For me, if you guys don't mind, I've got a game coming up here where I've got these assassins who have just descended upon essentially like level 1 characters. And so if you're cool with it, do you guys want to come up with a like an encounter that could use that terrain? I mean, would you be down with that, or do you have any other ideas, Hankrin?
Assassins moving in on low-level characters?
Yes. And so I think it's tough.
I
think it's toughy, but I'm thinking giving them some sort of environmental something. I don't know. But the idea was I want to use assassins moving in on low-level characters, give them some sort of retort, and make it interesting. Now,
so the characters are sort of minding their business. They're heading off to some important errand. And at some point, they're going to be beset by these assassins, which assassin to me usually means they're going to sort of jump out, right? They're going to, they'll be lying in wait, or they'll swing down, or they'll pop out, but they're not like walking down the road or something. These guys are they're going to materialize.
Right. And so, and we could even say assassins or bounty hunters, you know, so something in that ilk where whether the players know it or not, they have gotten the attention of someone else.
Yeah, someone's after them, and they're generally good at killing, whether they're hooded ninjas or whether they're just guys that are like highwaymen that have a contract on.
Right. It might not be
competent killers.
Competent killers, but they might not be assassins in the way that they have to use shadow and subterfuge, but they are definitely contract adventurers who are out, you know, trying to get this. What are they? Skip tracers.
Skip tracers?
That sounds a little more cyberpunk to me.
It's a no. Well, that's like a modern-y term for bounty hunter.
Whoa, that's cool.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh.
So like it's a situation where the players aren't actively basically pressing the situation. They are about to be pressed.
Correct.
And that's what's going to be interesting about this counter. So if you've been doing like 20 rooms in a row, this is going to be more fun.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is interesting too, because to me, having it flipped around like that, this is a really good way to pull in something that they did before. So what's that thing in a last session or a few sessions ago, the players made that choice and probably ticked one person off to save another, or maybe snubbed someone or killed someone. This is the revenge. This is that thing that comes back.
Exactly. Or did something thoughtlessly. And I think this is the thing that we won't be figuring out, because this is the thing people will
this is what you can plug in. Right.
But I also like the idea of something that they thought they made the right decision, or something like they did something that in their mind they didn't consider the repercussions.
Correct.
You know, like they they caught the merchant doing corrupted things, but some of the money was actually keeping the orphanage open. I mean, that's like a super like way too on the nose example.
Right.
But the idea being like somebody comes after them because they accidentally closed the orphanage, and they had no clue. They didn't realize,
It's like
bad example, but something like that is what you're looking
Yeah, we don't want to make the assassins too noble.
Yeah, no.
We are avenging the orphanage. It's kind of like, oh man,
You're like, what?
maybe
We'll
we should let them kill us.
Yeah, like, oh, sorry, we messed up.
I give
Don't
up.
do that.
I give up.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, they're always leaving this wake of circumstance behind them because they're thinking they're heroes all the time.
Exactly that.
So who are our assassins? There are some leftovers from some, not necessarily botched activity, but collateral damage, right?
Exactly. Collateral damage is a good way to put it.
Yeah, so maybe if you're doing like the Duke Harold type storyline, which is basically your characters are like witch hunters. In the process of being witch hunters, they kill these working guards all the time in my stories.
Oh,
We're just just dudes who work in a town, right? But they are sort of militarily trained guys. So if you walk around killing like The Rock's friends, The Rock is going to get mad.
Eventually.
Exactly. Yeah.
Totally, dude. Exactly that.
But they're kind of paramilitary too. So it's like, they hear that these adventurers, took out these two guards up in the manor. Now they know that the manor was kind of a den of evil, but these are still their friends. So they rally together. They're a little paramilitary group. They're going to hunt you down. And here we get some of our flavor. And then it's sort of feeling like something is starting to take shape. Like these are almost like Blackwater type characters, right?
Totally. Yes.
They're almost like rogue jackals in a way, if you were thinking Dragon Grin.
Totally that. They could definitely be rogue jackals to where, put a little layer on there where they're maybe a little stronger than average. And like you said, paramilitary training is key because I want the players to feel that.
Right.
Yeah, the plan is to kill the players, not to catch the players or to encounter the players and explain the big plot. They're like, no, we're going to kill these people. We're going to lure them into a trap of some sort maybe, or we're going to they're not going to know. They'll never know why they died, but they're getting rid of them. It's not like they jump out and you did this bad thing. It's like, no, one of you gets an arrow to the neck. Step one, what happens next?
Yeah,
right. So usually when we're building these, we get this piece first. Sometimes we get the utility of the encounter first.
Sure.
But in this case, we kind of have a lot of our sounds like our threats kind of coming together. It's going to be a human threat.
Yeah.
So that's something right there. So we already know, like, if I'm doing my prep, I need to look up like an archer guy and maybe a spear guy, a couple of shield guys, and there I kind of got my threat is taken care of. So if we were to look at the utility of the encounter, which is always one of the things I think about the most, where would we want to put this kind of ambush or this attack of vengeance? Is this something that's toward the end of a campaign? Is this before a dungeon? Is this to make travel interesting? Like, where should we put our cool ambush encounter?
I think it makes sense. I think, especially after we've done some of the encounters that we've done, this is that end of the season, not necessarily the end of the campaign, but this is the mid-season episode arc where the players have just felt a victory. So if you're talking about maybe they grabbed that heart of light, or maybe they made it out of that eldritch room, or even braved the fog of time, I want to get the players when they think, we crested a hill.
Exactly. It's that mid-season curveball where you're like, guys, we did it. What could possibly happen? Oh, wait a minute. Did you just die? So to me, this takes place on the other side of what is the exit of the dungeon. This is like brushing your shoulders off, like, wow, we made it. Doing some cure light wounds on each other.
And then, like he said, an arrow comes whizzing through the air.
The main thing is, while I do like that as when it happens, I want to throw out there that maybe it's an urban encounter. This is where the paramilitary, they have contacts, they know people. And like I said, in my mind, they are setting up the perfect circumstances for them to get the drop on the players, somehow. But it would have to be a place where they wouldn't think they were walking into a trap, like that's a town. It would still be after a great victory, but they go back and they're maybe headed to the tavern, whatever adventure.
That's what I think, on the way to town. Because I think these guys are smart enough to not do this in the middle of a public place, because murder is still murder in most places.
Yeah.
So it's going to be like the outskirts of town or something. So I think right after a dungeon, right after a victory, you can even kick off a session with this, like after you've ended it,
Yeah, yeah.
Like, oh, you've come out of the dungeon, and that's where we'll end it today.
I really like that too. I mean, that's up to the
So
people running it. But
So the utility of our encounter is a sort of a shaking loose of our characters, right?
Yes,
Because
totally that.
they get used to this feeling of like, well, we kicked another dungeon's ass, even after those crazy rooms those guys designed.
Exactly.
We're still awesome. We get a short rest, so we're kind of back in the game. And then, oh, by the way, we had that little thing we were going to do, blah, blah, whatever. They always have something they're wanting to do.
yeah, exactly.
And when they're heading over there, so I like this sort of fringe of urban. That's a great place for like bullying to happen. So how about they are ready to sort of do some transport. They go to their like kind of little merchant barge, which is maybe actually you lure them to the merchant barge because since they just finished the dungeon, they're going to want to buy stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, good call.
Actually, the good merchants are no longer in town because the taxes are too high. The cool merchant actually has this little skiff that he keeps out on the wharf. And then we get him out on the wharf. And here's maybe what I would like to throw in is the wharf is a fantastic place for a big fight because all your terrain can slide around.
Yes.
Being ships. So we get him out there and actually there's no merchant. He's like three evil hobbits, like, you know, with a long coat standing on each other's shoulders.
Yeah.
And as they're talking to him, they're like, something's a little off. And then behind them, like the dock is collapsed to trap them.
Yeah, yeah.
And our two guys kind of close in on a couple of, not like galleons, you know, we don't want to go that far, but like two little, you know, like war canoes kind of.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Exactly.
love me some war canoes.
Yeah, you know those things that the orcs they go onto the shore in Gondor, you know, those type of
Oh,
boats?
totally. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, there's like two of those, and each one has like 6 guys in it, and they close, and now we've got a mechanically interesting encounter, which is that these 3 pieces of terrain, the skiff and the 2 war canoes, can slide and move and even sink and be destroyed during the melee. So we don't just accidentally get like a parking lot melee.
Exactly.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. That's a really good point.
It keeps the terrain moving and so on. So I love that. So this is serious. These war canoes come, the dock is collapsed, and then that's where combat sort of begins, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. I think the fake merchant, he kind of like pulls a rope. And when he pulls this rope, like maybe some like low grade fantasy level TNT goes off and it blows the little wharf behind them.
Exactly.
So
and
it's not like the shore is a mile away. The shore is like, I don't know, 75 feet away.
I love this. All right. So in Encounter Machine, one of the things we're always working on is, you know, we do the frame, we do the mechanics, we do the hull, the weapons. So to me, the frame here is wharf ambush. That's kind of how we framed it.
Great.
Right? So what's that cool mechanical thing that we usually throw at them? How do we want to use that environment that's movable and those guys, the war canoes? Is there a mechanic that we want to throw in there to really say, hey, this is the sizzle?
Whew, maybe we have one of the attackers. They've actually brought like a Warforged with them.
Oh, nice.
And the only way to take this guy out, because he's just too tough, is that on the other war canoe, they also brought one of those cool little mini pirate cannons. Like it's a hand-sized cannon that sits on a little tripod.
Yep.
So they have those 2 assets are their main killing assets. And both are a little beyond the power of the players. So the mechanic we're putting in front of them is you could try to slugfest yourself through it, but every round, all 3 masses are going to separate by a little bit. And you really need to use that cannon either to kill the guys, to beat the Warforged, or to get a rope around the Warforged and use him as an anchor or as a sinker. Whatever.
Exactly. Something.
Whatever, but we give them these 2 incredibly heavy objects and then 3 sliding pieces of terrain and then let them improvise.
And I think so with the sliding terrain, you've immediately created a timer. Like you said, you know, we can say that they slide, like you said, a little bit each round, maybe 5 feet or so, maybe push it to 10 if you want it to really be a punchy, a really short timer, I guess.
Yeah.
But exactly, there's your timer right there is, okay, you know, basically players at some point are going to be stuck where they are fighting, unless they want to start swimming or
unless they want to swim or use a fly or we're not quite sure what level they are at this point.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think this is awesome. So essentially help me because there's, you know, I'm getting a mental image, make sure that I'm on the same page as everybody. As the wharf collapses, the players are now in the middle of this river on this floating chunk of the dock.
Well, it's we're talking more like sea area. So you said river, but I'm like,
yeah, I think it's like a harbor. Yeah, like a bay.
right?
Yeah,
On the bay. So, but they're floating. So the players are floating, and they are essentially having to move around, and these things are kind of coming in on them.
Yes.
So to me, the cannon is what they're using. Like you said, they have basically one sort of save me weapon that they can fire. Now, how does this? What do you want to do with the cannon? They get to use it once a round. Is that how you want to?
I don't think you can fire that thing that fast.
Okay, so it's slower. So it's
I think there's a load time on this thing.
So every other maybe, or someone has to use a.
I would say it takes setup. There is you have to make a check, because I don't know if you know how to load a cannon, but I don't. And you have to grab the gunpowder or whatever it is in your world, and you have to put it in the cannonball, and then the next turn you can light it and fire it, and then you still have to aim it.
Yeah,
no, that's totally.
So I would say that more like So there's two. It takes at least 2 rounds, but it's an action each round to do it. So you could load it.
Yeah, even revealing these components is going to be in the first maybe 3 to 4 rounds of the combat, right? Because they're not even sure what they're being beset with. So there's going to be a moment when they look closer, or someone finally does their long overdue perception check, and it's like whoa, they've got like a 700-pound Warforged on the one boat with a couple guys, and then they have like a little cannon on the other one, and like we're on the wreckage of a fake merchant skiff.
Exactly.
Not good. Bad setup.
Exactly. I love this, dude.
Not to overcomplicate it, but if you wanted, you could set the cannon up with that's how they set off this low-grade TNT. When they shoot the cannon at it, and you're like, hey, immediately you're giving the players, there's a cannon on one of these boats. There's a Warforged on the other one.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And so got some really cool ideas from the chat here. I've got the chat open in another window. So Jim Moreno is here, he's a great writer. He does a ton of articles for Geek and Sundry. And he's ready to rock and roll this. So we've got a couple of really cool things. Fireplug 1701D says, catch them off guard, basically a false sense of security. And so the idea is to, what Jeremy Lilly says, he has this mechanic that he put into a treasure barge encounter where everyone has to roll acrobatics check at the end of each round. If they fail, they basically get moved in some random direction.
Right.
To kind of follow along with that.
It's shifting and
right. And that's what he says. He says if they, it's listing, it's rocking. And if they collide with things like walls, barrels, whatever's on there, they basically get 1d4 bludgeoning damage.
Yeah,
just
perfect.
Popping that off.
Yeah, so there's just a little fountain that's picking at them as they're playing, a little fountain of pain.
Yeah,
exactly.
And they're sipping away at that fountain of pain. So that gives us another sort of hinge that can pull this time in. So away, it definitely feels like, man, we're not just the people who are cool all the time. Like, they engineered this situation to get us by the ding ding. And like,
it's very true. Yeah, exactly. And it is,
which is the nickname of the cannon, by the way.
The ding ding. Fire the ding ding.
Fire the ding ding.
Harry from Two Guys T and D&D says, load, aim, fire, 3 rounds.
Ooh.
I think that's pretty fair. I think
you gotta make it count then. Do not miss.
Exactly that. Love it.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is, I if we're really talking about getting them, that timer you were talking about, maybe after a certain, I don't know how you want to work it, but basically after a certain amount of time, the skiff starts maybe taking on a little water. And I'm not trying to kill them, but I want to push them to try to have to take another boat.
Well, and that makes sense, because if it gets hit by a cannon or a Warforged jumps on it, it's going down.
So I'm saying, like, after 1d6 rounds, what do you think that the ship starts sinking?
Definitely.
I mean, is that too unfair?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think
let a player roll that 1d6.
Yeah, exactly.
That's totally. I'm too nice to my players. That's why I need you guys. After 1d6, the ship starts sinking, and then it's like, okay, figure it out.
Yeah, because you can. I mean, they don't die if they sink, but they're obviously going to be in a lot of trouble if they are trying to make swim checks while people are taking pot shots at them.
This is the first encounter where that random halfling cleric who has the wand of fish command, or whatever, the staff of fish command, is gonna raise 2 sea turtles up out of the water, and he's gonna Aquaman across there, like, and he'll have like a Chol backpack on, and he's gonna own this encounter. But if you don't have that character, you might have a couple of deaths.
And you're good, because I'm thinking Aquaman sea turtle skis. He's just he's going across.
But it's gotta
important.
happen sometime.
Exactly. It is important to remember that these people, the goal of these people is literally to kill the players. That is to some degree the an important thing to remember as part of the mission statement when you're running this. Is in other cases it's like, hey, your players did something and something came out of the walls. They grabbed something and undead are coming after them. No, this is pure human calculatedness. It's
This is a revenge encounter.
We're murdering you. That's what's happening. You know, they're trying to sink the boat. They're trying to kill them, and that is, I think, an important thing to consider when running the encounter with people.
And one of them, you know, it's kind of like the instinct tag in Dungeon World on a monster. You know, it's kind of that one little thing you want to remind yourself over and over, and then it can become whatever you want. But to drive it home, we might want to have our Warforged, or like maybe the chief of them isn't the Warforged. He's like the smaller guy, the sort of shrewd-looking guy. And at some point, he needs to yell out, you know, like, "For Osric," you know.
Exactly, the battle cry.
Yeah, and someone needs to remember, like, oh God, Osric is that guy we hung up by his ankles in that house.
Yeah, like for no reason other than he was there.
Why did we do that? That was so dumb.
Why did we do that?
Exactly.
No, I love it. And if he didn't die, another way to do this, if he didn't die, you can show Osric.
Exactly.
You know,
he's
got the noose burn across his neck where he actually survived. And he's just like, you know, he's doing the Tim Roth and Rob Roy.
Yeah.
Like, I'll kill you.
Yep. He's only got one eye left, and one of his ears is kind of nipped off, and he's got a bad arm.
Yeah, just showing them the players the aftermath of whatever it was they did. You know, they used the magic missile on him, and it hit him square in the chest, and he's all burned. And, you know, it's like
this
wow,
is the guy.
I
thought he was dead. This is so awkward.
I'll tell you though, we're getting into another area now, which is the much deeper, more sublime part of the encounter, is that as a DM trying to counter like murder hobo sadism, it might be tempting to do this kind of encounter as like DM vengeance, right? And I think it's very important that you don't do that. Do not use an encounter like this because you don't like that your players are getting sadistic and leaving a trail of wreckage. I would actually do it for the opposite reason, which is like good guy characters who really do kind of hold the line as far as being heroes. This is a great way to remind them about a more complex world, rather than, you don't want players to ever feel like you're a mad DM and here I come to crush you.
Yeah. And if you ever wanted to reinforce the idea that they should become more sadistic, you know, run this for those players. But you're certainly not going to convert them by saying, hey, I can do it too.
Right.
But they're not going to suddenly find it in their hearts to not kill every guard they come across.
No, I totally agree with that.
Right. So it's a really fun setup to really get your, as I was saying, get your characters by the ding ding.
Your lawful goods.
I wouldn't use it that way. Yeah, I would have it flip it the other way. You know, your sadists are the people you need to isolate in the dungeons.
Exactly.
Here, let me point you at things you should be killing.
Right. Yeah.
All about the style.
Yeah. The sociopathy dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with that, and I think that using, I think, a thing where they didn't even realize the repercussions, or something that they actually did a really good thing. So, okay, here, let's use the last encounter. This episode of Encounter Machine isn't up yet, but the last one we recorded,
I didn't think about that.
there's an artifact that the players can grab. Well, what if that artifact was doing something really important, and now that it's gone, the creatures that it was keeping at bay have now started kind of filtering out of this crypt. So they don't even realize it, but what they've done in saving themselves and getting through, they've essentially started this sort of undead plague.
Yeah.
Even in small bits. Now undead are wandering the forest around there because they've taken this thing that has kept them at bay for so long. Yeah. Something that seemed so good and right and just at the time, it's like, hey, like you said, it's more complex than that. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Even if you do something good for good reasons, someone will usually see the short end of that. And having them come against that moral conundrum, I think, is interesting.
Yeah, it's going to make the world feel very lived in that sense, I think, for sure.
Yeah, and it's just one more, I mean, there's a million cases of this, but one more case where like morally aware players make everything so much more rich. For just your conqueror killers, they really honestly don't care that they let out some zombies and some farmers died. They're just like, whatever, we needed the artifact. Just go away.
Exactly. This is
So
going to
it's
mean
just-
less to them.
Yeah, it's just one more place where if you have one or two players in your group, it doesn't have to be everybody, but one or two who feels the wrong of it, it'll add a ton of context.
No, I agree with that. And I think that going through the encounter machine, we've hit the frame, we've hit the mechanics, we've hit the hull and the weapons. I think everything we just talked about is sort of the wetware. So to me, it's choosing something that isn't such a morally black and white, like the bad guys are coming back because you stole their money, or
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
the wetware is the player's like, oh my gosh, we're the bad guys.
In some way,
Yes.
make them the bad guys to someone, especially to someone relatively noble. Like you said, don't use the orphanage. Probably worst idea ever. But certainly, if they stole something, even if they stole something they really needed from somebody that was really bad, there was a good reason, and there was like something, like you said, mainly something they didn't consider, showing them the other side of the coin.
Yeah, your two best outcomes of this encounter are going to be, one, that they are now afraid whenever they're walking into what seem like kind of seedy situations.
Yeah.
Then two, you want them to wonder what the ramifications could be of other large actions that they do. Now, will that change your campaign and really play into their tactical decision making? Probably not, but it will give them some gut tickles. And the gut tickles are like what make the game. So
Totally that.
if you can get those two things to happen with the details of your so-called wetware, as we call it, then you have nailed this encounter.
Yeah. Like, I don't know a world where this would really happen, but one of my favorite outcomes would be if the players actually were like, hey, we surrender. Like, I'm not, but basically it comes, more to like, you know what?
Depending on the players, that could very well happen. They're like, hey, I see your point.
You know what?
It gets to the point where they realize why this is happening.
How can we make it right?
Like,
And
they're going to
then-
go back to town and face justice.
Yeah, like that is a really cool idea. And
That's
again,
heavy.
that's all on the players, but it's like, you did this and you didn't. It's like, okay, we owe you one. How do we make it right? And you're
Right.
talking about a good reason to do a side quest besides
Like plot hooks.
Bob the Wizard needs a magic orb. It's like,
You screwed somebody bad.
like, hey, we owe you. All right, we'll come in and make it right. It's like,
Yeah.
what? I think that's a cool concept.
Another moment to keep your DM sadism in check. If they do that, then you got to go with it. You can't be all bummed that you don't get to do your awesome mechanical encounter.
Yeah, or that you're like, oh, I was hoping to kill a player, or when they get to
Right.
travel, all right, we're gonna hang everyone. You're like, whoa,
Right.
whoa, whoa. You still want to give them quests. Like, don't be that guy.
I'm glad you're going to cooperate. We're going to
Yeah.
execute you over here in this.
Yeah,
versus-
sorry, that's how it works. Yeah, you're like, no.
That's
Hold back
fantastic.
on that one.
Hold back a little bit. Throttle down.
Throttle down. So if we had to name this encounter for an encounter machine, what would we name this thing?
Oh, man.
It's tricky because we have some cool names like the Fog of Time and like the Dungeon Turning Point. This be like, what?
That was not as good of one. Well, not all of our internal names are
The voice was there.
punchy. Yeah, you had it, and I was like, wait,
I
no,
sold
you got
it,
me.
baby. In
The Wharf of Wrath.
works for me. The Wharf of Wrath. The
That's what I mean. The wharf ambush. You see the wharf ambush, or try and come up with a name that, because it's an internal name. You're not going to tell your players today we're facing the.
Right.
Name it something that has something to do with the fact that it's
Ooh.
like they're at the gray area.
Can we use the word reckoning in it?
Yeah.
Sort of. Sure.
Right.
I like the like something like the Wharf of Reckoning, or like
Okay.
either that or
The Bay of Reckoning.
the Bay of Reckoning.
It's that or Fire the Ding Ding.
That's what I was gonna say. Or
That's
Bring
the
it back.
subtitle.
Yeah.
gotcha, Gotcha, gotcha by the ding ding.
Yep. I hope you
So
guys
we'll
are
call
ready
it-
to fire the ding ding tonight because
Exactly. Because that's what we're doing.
So we'll
It's a Wharf of
the
Reckoning.
Wharf of Reckoning.
Or Bay of Reckoning.
Bay of Reckoning.
Bay of Reckoning.
Way cooler. So if you guys have some time, I think that's an encounter machine, but I'm down for maybe another like 10, 15 minutes of just doing some Q&A in the chat. Would you be down with that?
Yeah. How do I see the chat? I don't see that.
Oh, so if you go to the actual YouTube video, which
okay.
we'll shoot
We
you the
would
link.
send you, but we're on different PCs.
Oh yeah. I think I'm.
Okay, you got it. Because I'm like, man,
No,
usually
James
we're
will
doing
hook
this
you
all in the same one, but
Well, go ahead. Be our narrator there, Tim.
All right, sweet. So if you are watching this right now, there's obviously a little delay. So what questions do you have about this encounter, any encounter? You've got the 2 ding dings here, and then this ding ding here. So you've got triple ding ding Q&A. What are some questions that you all have? And by the way, if you're watching this on Tabletop Terrors, and there's some out there chance that you're not subscribed to Drunkens and Dragons, go there and subscribe. Hankering is one of my personal favorite channels. So you got to go check out Drunkens and Dragons. Excellent advice, practical encounters, room design, application, and always getting the cerebrum cooking. So check out Drunkens and Dragons.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Sure, man, for sure.
Okay,
and
yeah, I can see the chat now.
Awesome.
There you go.
Cool.
So who has some questions? Any questions here? Until someone in the chat has a question, I will. I'll throw one to you, Hankrin, and I'll say, where do you come up with the ideas when you know, okay, I've got a game coming up on Saturday? Are you actively looking like, okay, I need an encounter? What are you like watching the mailman? Like, what you're like looking at different things?
So we're not good at building encounters, but I realize now it's because Tim's watching the mailman to find him.
Usually what I'll do is I'll just write down like 2 little bullets that are maybe 5 words each. And they're what I want.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if I want, a giant fire in a castle, it just because it just pops in my brain like a 6-year-old kid, I just write that before I think about anything that means. And often those 2 little bullet points will have nothing to do with each other and nothing to do with the current campaign.
Yeah.
They're just things that come out of like the limbic mind, I don't even know what they are. And then my prep process is usually the strange work of finding a way that those somehow fit into what's going to happen that night. And then I just try to cram it together and explain why that popped in my head. And then usually I'm out of time.
Exactly. And I think, okay, so that actually brings up the next thing. So you place the pieces is kind of what we call that, where you just have these 2 pieces and you go, all right. When you say you run out of time, when you plan an encounter, do you think in your mind, all right, this is the bulk of the night? Like, this is where we're going to spend a lot of our time? Or do you even think about that?
Yeah, I used to think about it more, I would say. And, it depends on the group too. Some groups are pretty predictable in their consumption speed.
Okay.
But this group that I've had for the last 2 years was highly unpredictable in their consumption speed. They would take tiny things and make them huge and huge things and make them tiny. So about halfway through, I kind of abandoned the concept of how much big was and small was. And I got much more into these sort of chunks, mainly mechanical chunks too. A lot of my ideas are mechanical ideas. And then I'm forced to try to explain them. Like I definitely think in a sort of Tinker Toys kind of a way. And then I have to figure out why the Tinker Toys are even there. Why is there a sliding platform in this battle between safety and peril?
See, and I think I think that is an interesting thing. I feel like we sort of used our way to do it, but your way to do it is a little bit opposite, at least based on the beginning of this video. We decided what it was first, and then you came up with you were like, it's got to be on a wharf because there needs to be moving parts, more or less. Whereas we were thinking like right outside the town, but I like that you do it. You're like, no. You will never have an encounter in a boring place if you come up with a cool place first. You're like, no, come up with a cool place first and then put something in it that matters. And I feel like that's something that I get backwards 90% of the time.
Right.
I come up with an encounter and I'm like, all right, where can it be cool? I think, no, burning castle. And then let's figure the rest out later.
Right. Like come up with the cool place first and then find a way to plant them into the cool place.
Exactly. So we did get a question.
Yeah, we had a good one here. Well, first a comment. The comment was Ben Fisher, super cool guy, always a huge supporter of Tabletop Terrors and Absolute Tabletop, says, haven't heard of Drunkens before. Strangely, I guess. More hours of things to watch. And yes, you will get sucked right in. So I would just jump into any of the playlists and let it ride. You've got a good couple weeks ahead of you. So you want to go ahead and read that one?
Sure, yeah. So I'm going to read this name as though I know what it is, but I'm going to get it wrong.
Can I say it how I always say it in my head when I'm reading her comments?
I would love for you to.
I always say, and please help me here, I always say Prupra.
That's what it says. P-R-U-P-R-U-H. Prupra. Because there would be an H at the beginning if it was the same word. We're not going to go into that. But it says, how do you guys pull back in an elegant way when you discover that you've made an encounter way too hard for your low-level players, if you even do?
Oh man, what a great question.
I was going to say, I have an idea on that, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about that, if that's something that you do.
Well, yeah, if you sense that you have, brought a knife to a gunfight a gun to a knife fight, and your players are the people with the knives. If you get that sudden feeling that this is not fun, this is going to be terrible, I'm bad at things. Why did I make their damage 3d12? What was I thinking? Usually I will openly tell my group that I'm going to nerf something.
Okay.
I will just announce it. I'll just be like, I don't want to ruin this or change the story or railroad you or force it into something that you guys aren't creating. But if I keep going like this, I'm just going to melt you.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
So I'm going to be like, I'm new, guys. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. So I'm going to change this 3d12 breath weapon down to a 2d10 breath weapon. Is everybody cool at the table with that? And we'll just continue. And if they say, no, man, we got this, then okay, screw the nerf. Here it comes.
Yeah.
I think that is something that is too often overlooked, is literally just telling your players, hey, I forgot to write this part down, or you guys did something I didn't expect, or in your case, hey, I'm going to change this. I'm not going to do 3d12 every single time. I have started doing that a little bit, just being honest. Hey, listen, I have a lot of stuff to tell you right now. You rolled really high on your perception and I wrote a lot, so just buckle up and pay attention. Or in that case, because I would have never considered, usually I do it secretly. I would have maybe made something else happen. Maybe if I was spawning 4 guys around or rolling, a d4 and I rolled 4 3 times, I'm like, I just maybe spawn 2 each time or slow it down, come up with a reason that it stops for a few rounds so they can get back in. But in the same respect, I am also way too light on my players. After every time I play, I think, man, I should have been harder on them. But until the moment the game ends, I'm like, oh, but I don't want to. I'm scared. And I'm like, no, I've got to do the 3d12 breath weapon and let them have it.
Well, and I want to. So the thing that I think is most important is what you said, Hankerin, which is candor and transparency. Because I think as Dungeon Masters, sometimes we shoulder the weight ourselves where it is collaborative. So I think that that's huge with everything. The other thing is that I put a link to a video in this chat, and I'll make sure to put it on the actual description of the video where you do a full video on challenge tuning.
Yeah.
A really good video about the damage, the disruption, and the different things like that. But to speak to that directly, one of the things, it's dependent on your system, but in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, I think the thing that I was forgetting for a long time, dropping to 0 hit points is when the game gets awesome.
Yeah.
And it is further from death than you think.
That is a good point.
It is, I think sometimes as Dungeon Masters, I know I am like, oh no, they're at 0.
That's us, man.
To me, that's where it gets great. When a comrade has fallen and you have to use your resources in the midst of what you're doing to go and help them, but you're forgetting about the death saving throws and then so many of the healing things that can bring them back to at least 0.
Exactly. That can keep them from dying.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as long as you're not being too sadistic, I think we need to remember that getting to 0 hit points is about 10 feet from death, not 10 inches.
Exactly. And in the same respect, using that as just one more thing to tax the resources in any encounter.
Exactly.
Because that's another thing I'm really bad at, is letting them rest. I'm like, no, long rest, it's fine. And in my mind, I'm not considering that, well, no, part of the fun for them and for me is taxing their resources and not letting them always get all the way back. Because while they might feel really good and awesome, it'll never feel as good as if they barely get through something because they just had to do something else.
Dropping a player is one of the best stories they'll ever tell. That's the one they're going to go, oh man, remember that? And if you do it all the time,
yeah,
so it sounds kind of like the short, curt answer to Prue-Prue's question is kind of no. It's kind of, you actually very seldom do you want to reel an encounter back because players are so resourceful. And I think this is a great reminder of how important it is to both be a player and a DM if you can. Because just in my last game where I have a 4th level ranger, I was dropped and I made attempted 5 death saves before I got back up. So one more, I was either gone or I was up. Like there was no way. And
you had a seven game series there.
Yes. And so as the DM, your instinct might be like, oh God, this poor bastard has been over here down for the last 4 turns, like hating life because he doesn't get to do anything. But in reality, me as a player, I was having such a great freaking time because everybody was in peril, because I'm, kind of our battlefield controller, and without me up, they were all kind of, our whole plan was scattering and breaking, and like, it was just getting so exciting and so amazing. And I knew like my next D20, like my whole character sheet was writing on this next roll.
Exactly.
Yeah, dude.
And as the DM, you're kind of like, damn, I'm kind of evil. But no, it was like one of the best nights we've had in a while. Yeah, exactly. It was awesome. And I was like right on the razor's edge.
And if you really want to bring a party together, don't forget how powerful it can be when one player uses their turn to run across the battlefield help a fallen player. And again, like you said, it taxes their resources, but you want to talk about the players, even most murder hobos, when their comrade drops, it's like, you mess with my family, you mess with me, and it becomes, there's something that matters on the table.
Yeah.
And they begin to act in a way that they probably wouldn't otherwise if the battle was going really well. Yeah. So I think that that's super cool. Totally.
Yeah. So just in extreme face melting circumstances, yes, Prue, you need to pull back just a nudge. But almost every other time, I think James has a great point, which is that you generally will err on the merciful side, and that isn't necessarily good for everybody.
Exactly. It makes it a little less fun, I think.
Yeah.
So Harry from Two Guys T&D says, do you have any advice for making chases exciting, be it environment or creatures used? I feel like the DMG random table is pretty boring.
Mm-hmm. Man, chases are tough. It's tough to convey sliding terrain, whether you're in Theater of the Mind or used terrain, both of them. It's tough to convey an actual belt of data that is moving along. There's no easy way to do it, but making it exciting, there's a lot of things to do. I mean, you guys, we've worked through some ideas together, just like the wagon chase and stuff like that.
So if off the top of my head, if I were making a chase, I've never run a chase before, but if I had to make one, I think the important thing is realizing that it's just going to come down to skill checks. And again, off the top of my head, you want some other things, but the important thing being, it could be very boring. If you're running down the street, make a skill check. Okay, do it again. All right, we're going to continue this until you either fail or you succeed. Right. But what I would do is I would, say it's urban. I like the idea of an urban. I'm thinking like Assassin's Creed style, where what you're doing is basically it's a bunch of little mini encounters where you tell them, okay, this is what is happening. There is, a bunch of people. What do you do? So it's not just a skill check. It's like, well, you can try to get through them, but you're going to be a little slow. Yeah. Or you can maybe try and jump and swing on the wall, but that's going to be an athletics check. You try to barrel through them, but that's going to be a strength check. Or it's giving them a bunch of little things, but also keeping it very snappy, not letting them wait and think, kind of really almost bothering them like, okay, what do you do? What do you do? Keeping it going quickly and then doing a little bit of that and then, having it then end. Rather than one way, which is all rolls, or one way, which is all random. It's like I would do a bunch of little zones of encounters.
And that just random. I think that's cool too. Like, I think to me, and I was kind of working with this. I only used it very quickly in a playtest, but it seemed to work, which was it's skill checks, but you kind of do them up front at the beginning of the round.
Okay, yeah.
So the way that I did it was I randomly rolled on a small chart I made of dex, strength. I even did charisma. Like, you run into that person, you go, excuse me, that thing where you can use it. And basically everyone randomly had to roll whatever 3 skill checks I picked.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, what results did you get real quick? And I kept it super lean, like, 10, 15, 20, like something really quick to use. Anyway, the point is, if you got all 3, you progressed. If you only got 2, you fell behind. If you only got 1, you fell even further behind, which sounds like it's complicated, but you basically then use zones essentially and say, okay, go ahead and roll, so that everyone gets a chance to then narrate. It's like, all right, if it's the dex check, you say, these barrels come rolling at you, and then, narrate what you do.
Yeah.
And so essentially it was like everyone gets to, which it probably sounds more complicated when I'm explaining it, but it's like using fate zones in a way, but then tying 1 or 2 skill checks to get ahead or fall behind.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
And when I've done them, again, I have this kind of weird mechanical imagination, but to me, there's really two kind of chases. The one is where the ground represents battle exclusion. So when I fall off of the thing, or I stumble, or I quote unquote fall behind, what's actually happening is I'm being excluded from the red hot tip of the battle.
Yeah.
It's usually where all the cool stuff is happening, right? If it's a car chase and you fall out of the car, you're kind of excluded from the gun battle now, right? And,
Right.
And as you guys know, I use that term battle exclusion. There's a lot of different mechanics you can do, which are basically just a way to take a player and he no longer gets to participate for a very short amount of time. And then he, in this case, catches back up. So that's the one type. The other one that is a little more extreme, a little more dangerous, is where the ground is actually, it's like the childhood game Ground is Lava. So the chase is actually either so fast or over such hazards or in the sky where falling off or falling behind or stumbling one of these little mini checks, which is a perfect way to create little micro obstacles, actually results in either permanent battle exclusion or massive damage, or it's much more critical that you hold the hell on. Kind of like the Deathwing fight in WoW, where you're fighting on the back of the dragon, and it's like, if it spins and throws you off, that's it, you're done. And if you're playing zones, you could say you don't have to die at that moment. You can land in a farmhouse, but your character is battle excluded by putting him in the little farmhouse zone, and the other heroes are up on the dragon, and now he needs to figure out a way to grapple back up there and get back in the fight. Get back in the fight. It's kind of the tone of a chase.
Exactly. And I probably want to make one thing clear. When I say I use fate style zones, I mean for distance. So exactly what you're saying, but what I would do is I would say like close, you could come up with any three,
right?
But it's like far, close, right on the edge, or like you said, like the hot tip, where it's like essentially if you miss one of those skill checks, you go one zone back.
Right.
And now, so basically that's how it works. And I think the way you're talking about it would work really well is that if you fall, quote unquote, fall off, it's like you go from chase to hanging on.
Right.
And, from hanging on to fall. It's like you're kind of falling back.
And so we've talked mechanics the whole time, but one more thing I want to throw out there is also, in order to make chases interesting, make them happen in the sky or on, like horse-drawn carriages, or make sure they're cool. In the same way that you can have a phrase I love, I don't know how often you use it, a parking lot combat. You can basically have the same thing with a chase. They need a really good reason to be chasing the person, as well as it needs to be really awesome. Like you said, like some horse-drawn carriages style, where it's going and it's nighttime and it's woods and it's something really awesome, because there's always a chance that your players don't give chase. So if you plan a whole really cool chase encounter and they're like, "Now we'll just get him. We know where he's going. We're just going to get him when he gets there."
Yeah, man.
You got to make sure that it's a cool, interesting chase. And then mechanically, of course, there are a lot of really cool ways to do it.
No, that's for sure. And so a couple of comments from the chat. One of them, Jim Moreno, says, basically create a random encounter style table with possible distractions or disruptions that are kind of like hazards as you're getting chased, so that it's fair too. And I think the thing that's worth mentioning in all of this is if you want your players to give chase, the trick that I learned, and I learned this from Spoonie the Bard, it's like his #1 hack: steal something from them. Players hate it.
It can be junk too. It can be one little piece of junk.
Doesn't even matter.
You steal from your players, they are coming after you, and they're coming after you mad. So anyway, maybe you want to do like maybe one more question?
Sure.
We'll do like, let's see here. Well, comment, Ben Fisher says, I would make rooftop chases with obstacles and allow things in adjudication like success with disadvantage or at a cost, failure but with an advantage, variation in failure, etc.
The thing I want to say is Tim and I think, had some cool ideas, but I think that one of my biggest problems is too often coming up with a really cool mechanical way, and then the way you summed it up was battle exclusion. If you're behind, you have to use your action to get back into the battle, and you can't attack. But if you are in the battle, you're attacking, but you might fall behind. Like I think that it can work all of the ways, but I am more of that style.
Yeah.
Because as a GM, I tend to add too much complication, but then my players add all of their complication, and then there's too much going on. Whereas if I give them one little simple basic thing, they'll add the complication. They'll take care of the rest of making it so that now there's 2 chases happening, or this other, they're gonna blow it out of the water. And so if I have one easy mechanic to keep track of, which is sort of Encounter Machine's deal, you let your players do whatever they want, and it doesn't get untrackable, and you're not making notes and drawing. It's a lot easier. That way.
No, I hear you. So we're waiting for, I think, we got a couple more questions, but I wanted to ask you a question, which is, as you're prepping, Hankrin, how many encounters do you plan? Now, keyword, I understand, like you said, they take big things, make them small things, make them big. But in your brain, how many things do you scroll down in the notebook to say, here's what I'm going to have prepped for the night? What's your magic number of encounters?
So I'm looking at his icon, and he's frozen currently. So he might not be here anymore.
Uh-oh.
Or we might not be. Could go either way.
Let's see. What do you want to do?
Play the video and click live. See which one of us is missing. Click the live button. Nope, there's a button.
Oh,
yeah.
I see.
We're here.
Oh, we're here.
He's not here.
He's not here. I'll be Hankrin.
No, you won't.
No, I won't. Greetings, programs. We will still... He's frozen when his heart's not open. Oh, so did we pronounce it right? You said it was okay with the name, but can you phonetically write how it is? Is it Prupra? Or is it Prupru? Prapra? Ben Fisher says, how much do you use standard reskin and or custom creatures in your D&D games? Can I give the number one hack for the all-time? And this is like the thing that you can do forever, which is this. Imagine that the monster manual has no names and absolutely no art. Okay? That's how often I use reskinned things. Mechanics that are reasonable and moderately play tested are all in the monsters manual.
Yeah.
Reskin everything. Just look for the challenge rating. That's it. I reskin every time, every encounter, as often as I can. Pretend that the monsters don't have names and pretend that they don't have images, and just go to town and reskin everything.
Yeah, that's what I do. I like to... There are advantages and disadvantages to that, but I do like to basically just come up with monsters, because then I can describe them and I don't need art. But in the same respect, one thing that I run into is that players will be like, oh, I wonder if it's this, or I wonder if it's that. And I feel bad thinking they're never going to guess it because I just made it up when I prepped today.
Exactly. I love doing that. I love messing with players as far as the descriptions of creatures. Wait, because they're trying to meta.
Exactly.
Wait, what is this? Is this hold on.
But Prue is closer, which is funny because that's what Hankrin said.
Oh, that is exactly what he
got
said.
it right. So that's pretty funny.
Oh, Jim made a good point too. Jim said all 3 books are guidelines. 100%.
Exactly.
I would reskin everything. And let's see here.
Jeremy says he hardly ever uses the monsters right out of the book, which, like I said, I feel the same way. I do. One of the favorite things my favorite things that I like getting from the monster manual, and sometimes I will just use the monster that it's a part of, but I love reading like their what they like to do and where they live and what their cultures are like.
Sure.
Because then I just build something around that.
Yeah.
And whether it's actually that monster or not, you can get a lot of really cool ideas from, oh, they live this way, hags are in covens, but they're backstabby and this and that. Suddenly, whether or not you use a hag, you've got a coven of witches that has all this flavor because you just read about them.
Sure. And
that was why I loved Volo's guide so much.
Honestly, too, if you want to go crazy, Hankrin's back.
I'm alive.
He's alive. I thought for sure you were a goner.
Apparently, I threatened the wrong merchant because my internet dropped for a minute there.
You did the internet wharf encounter? But so what you do is you take we were talking about monsters and how often you reskin them, and I said like 100% of the time.
Oh, yeah.
So if you want to do something super cool to get your brain going, I call this the collider, where you purposefully crash 2 things together and make it work. Pick 2 monsters, take the name of one, and then smash it into the mechanics of the other, and you will start getting into the craziest parts. So you talked about hags.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I need these crazy orcs. Well, you take orcs and you go, now the orcs are reskinned as hags. Why is that? Sounds super weird, right? Wait, no, it's this group of mystic orcs.
Wait, there's more.
Well, yeah, it's this group of mystic orcs that don't follow Grumsh. They eat magic. They do. Now all of a sudden you have the coolest orcs you've ever seen just because you took the name of one monster and the mechanics of another. So
Exactly.
I love doing that stuff all the time.
That's like my Umber holder that I did.
Oh, okay.
Tell me more.
It was just basically a floating head of an Umber Hulk. That played like sort of like 6 little Umber Hulks on the tentacles.
All right.
So instead of the beholder shooting all the different rays, all the little tentacles were doing a confusing gaze, and then it's like biting with the mandibles. So it had like 7 mandible attacks.
That is crazy.
But it was floating around in this silver mine.
Exactly that. And the players will never forget that. They'll be like, what was that thing we fought? Exactly. And it creates that real sense of wonder that you should have wandering around in a silver mine fighting monsters you've never seen.
Yep. Yeah, that was a great one. It also had a corrosive tongue attack. And our cleric had just put a bunch of money and time into this magic shield that would return to him like it was magnetic.
Right.
And he rolled like a crit 1 on that whole thing, and the tongue like dissolved the shield right in front of his eyes. And he's like, no.
That's so good.
That was a good one.
That's so amazing. So yeah, I guess we'll call it here. Any final thoughts, Hankerin, on encounter design, or like if you had to give one big fat tip for a lot of new people? We have a lot of new people on the channel. Anything you tell them?
Yeah. I mean, everything I say is always comes back to one principle, which is just simplicity. It's so easy in this hobby in general to think that complexity is somehow what you're supposed to do, or like there's some kind of right way to do it. And there's just no such thing. It's just playing like Chutes and Ladders is fun at a tabletop, and playing D&D at the complexity level of Chutes and Ladders is also fun. And exactly. So if you're a new DM and you're looking at all this stuff and it's just stuff, like the way they write the books almost assumes that you have read like 20 other RPG books. It assumes all this deep knowledge, and it's just totally overwhelming. So my advice for new Dungeon Masters is always the same, is just think of something extremely simple and then put it together in the simplest way you can manage, and constantly remind yourself, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. And it's okay.
Exactly.
It's fine that I don't know what I'm doing. As a matter of fact, the more open I am with the fact that I'm not sure exactly how this whole mess works, the more fun you will have.
Exactly. And that's still something that I continuously work on. Like I said, I'm always the guy that goes right to the complex thing, and I'm trying the same thing every time. I'm reminding myself, no, more simple. The players will complicate it. Don't worry.
Yeah. If I had one tip that I would give in addition to that, I would say your encounters can end quicker than you think they can. I like to shorten them. I do. Because if you waste, I don't say waste, but if you use all of your time to finish out an encounter until the monster's last hit point is gone, you need to be okay with feeling out the room, feeling out the encounter. If we're at a place where the players feel victorious and the monster's close, I'll either have them run away, I'll drop them early, because I want to keep the feel of the game going. So it's also okay to change things midstream. And if the players have succeeded, or they found that they have been victorious, I'll call it early, or have the monster crumple, or so on. Not to make it easy on them, but sometimes when combat feels over, it's over, and I don't have to worry about that extra 14 hit points.
Yeah, especially if they roll poorly one whole round. We're like, they're going to kill it this round, and everyone misses.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, well, it just brings it down a little bit. Yeah, but that's all playing it by ear.
Yep.
So, yeah.
What about you? Any final thoughts? Or you?
No, I think, no.
Covered.
Yeah.
So, well, guys, this has been Encounter Machine Live with Hankerin Fernale of Drunkens Dragons.
Fun.
So, Hankerin, we always let people plug whatever they want. What should anyone who's watching this video check out right now that you're up to?
That I'm up to?
Yeah. What antics are you getting up to over there? Like, you want to do index card RPG, or what should we send people toward?
Most of my work right now is going into index card RPG. So if you hop over to Drive-Thru RPG and look up index card RPG, you'll kind of see what I'm up to. I also have a video up about it, but it's basically, I just came off 2 years of crafting all week, every week, which was, by the way, totally awesome. But I like variety in life. So I have kind of completely shifted over to this kind of index card method, and completely on accident. Like, I just did a great one shot last year, and I did it with index cards, and it was one of the best nights we had. And it's because my mind wasn't limited to what I could craft like in the next 5 days, or, you know, how good a sculpt I could do. All that stuff is really fun, but the index cards really set me free. So we had rideable dinosaurs, and we had this massive crack.
Right.
It was Night of the Crack, you know, which a lot of people have seen, where the goblins are celebrating the end of the world and stuff. So that's what I've been up to. So I'm getting excited about more people kind of seeing the fun of the index card method, and I'm going to be doing more videos just about how it can be fun. And, you know, it's nothing new. It's like Matt Click has a great video about index cards. Fate and Dungeon World have been doing it forever. So I'm just kind of jumping on the bandwagon for a while and enjoying doing like marker drawings and stuff.
Yeah, so we'll definitely put a link to that in the description of the video.
Sweet.
Check it out. It's super cool. It's a really good product, and I think no matter how you want to use, you could even use it to do what we talked about here today. You don't have to use it in game if you don't want to. You could just pop down 5 index cards, and there's your castle on fire. Build an encounter. It's really good for just good inspiration overall.
Yeah, you're like sitting down, like I need to make a D&D encounter for tonight, and then you pull out like the brain in a jar, and it's kind of like, ooh,
Yeah.
all right, this could be a fun night.
It's going to be awesome. And so let us know how if you guys out there, if you get it, make sure to, rate it and, keep supporting Drunkens and Dragons. But on our side, just subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of the family. If you stumble on this video, crush that subscribe button and stick around, because you're going to see more Encounter Machine in 2017 and probably some other collaborations between Tabletop Terrors and Drunkens and Dragons.
Yeah, man.
Hell yeah, these are great.
So guys, it's been awesome. Until next time, may your dice roll high.